Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 15 of the On Deck podcast. I am your host, Roberto, and today we're going to be talking a lot about pitching, some good performances by some pitchers, some returns and milestones from another, and then a not so great performance from a team overall. All that in today's episode. So starting off with some not so great news, we have Justin Steele going down for the Chicago Cubs. He is getting reconstructive surgery on his UCL, and it hasn't been specified if it's going to be Tommy John or just the internal brace ligament repair. But regardless, he's not coming back for the rest of the year, and this is going to be a big hit for the Chicago Cubs rotation, which outside of Imanaga and Steele, has a bunch of question marks in it. You have guys like Matthew Boyd, who showed some flashes last year with the Indians and has had a couple good starts for the Cubs, but you're looking for him to be consistent over, his 32 starts. You have a guy like Jameson Taillon, who hasn't been great in his Cubs uniform, but, hoping that he can be a consistent innings eater at, a high 3s, low 4s ERA for you. And then you have Imanaga there as, your bona fide ace and hoping to build around him for the future. But with Steele going down, it's going to be hard for the Cubs to do that. And especially in this wide open division that is the NL Central with teams like Milwaukee. You could have Cincinnati come and make some noise, but the Cubs right now are in the lead in that division, and I think they need to make a move to replace Steele, or at least gain someone of lesser production to throw into that starting rotation to provide them the depth, because right now you have a guy like Ben Brown that you're probably gonna transfer into more of a starting role instead of more of a swingman role. And, he's shown good stuff, but there's been good times and bad times. We go back to some of the Tokyo games where he had that blow up inning. But then if you go back to his last start, looked great. Curveball was looking absolutely fantastic against the Dodgers. So, it's a mixed bag with him, but I've seen a lot of things online and saying maybe the Cubs make a move for Sandy. I personally don't think that it's going to happen, especially because there was an article that came out quoting that the Marlins weren't going to move Sandy right now. But, I think if the Cubs are, in the running for Sandy, and we forget that the Cubs have one of the better farm systems in the MLB right now. So they really can throw a competitive package the Marlins' way to, try to lure them into the idea of moving Sandy, who's on a very, very team-friendly contract, if I might say. So do we see the Marlins make a move like they did with Arias, where they moved him super early in the season for, a decent package? But I think with Sandy being the pitcher that he is, coming off of Tommy John, I think the more and more that, you give him his starts and get his legs and arms under him, I think we can, see Sandy come back to, I wouldn't say as dominant as he once was, but we can see him be, a reliable elite innings eater, throw up 180, 190 innings at, a low 3s. I think he could get back to being that guy, and hopefully, the Marlins are able to, stay competitive and we see him continue to be in a Marlins uniform. But if the right package comes up, who knows where he might go. I can see the Cubs making a move. Bringing him on to that rotation would be a massive help. Then you could see a guy like Ben Brown go back into that swingman role. And if he's being, the Ben Brown that we saw against the Dodgers. I think he could be a really good swingman, but especially in that bullpen, which needs help, like desperately. That bullpen is just, it drives me nuts how their offense is so good and so electric. Like your quote unquote black hole is catcher, where, usually your catcher isn't going to be a very important offensive piece, but everybody in that lineup is producing right now. And, to see them have a really weak bullpen, I think that's the missing link for the Chicago Cubs team. And I think a move needs to be made after seeing Steele go down, which again is a big hit for this rotation. But I still think that the Cubs are going to be competitive and, make some moves during the deadline, and absolutely being buyers to, again, show that Kyle Tucker, this is somewhere that we want you to be. We're showing you that we're going to be competitive for the future. And, hopefully he resigns on a long-term contract. But this Cubs team, and especially the NL Central, is definitely going to be a division that, we're going to be paying a little more attention to that division, especially right around the trade deadline, see how every team is shaping up and see what moves are going to be made by each of those teams to really push them over the edge. Next, we're going to be talking about a pitcher that made his season debut today, and that is Spencer Strider of the Atlanta Braves. Coming off of Tommy John, not Tommy John, the internal brace surgery on his UCL last year. His season debut was good, not great. Pitched 5 innings, went 97 pitches, 5 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk, 5 Ks, and a fact on that is he officially hit 500 career strikeouts, so congratulations to Spencer Strider. Looking forward to seeing how quick he gets to that 1,000 mark, in my opinion. But he finished out with 1 walk and gave up a home run to, out of all players in that Toronto lineup, gave it up to Vlad, which was, I had to fact check this because I couldn't believe it, but it was Vlad's first home run of the season. First home run. Mind you, we are, just about 20 games into the season. And yeah, this is Vlad's first home run. I would have thought, after signing this extension, or at least, knowing about the extension, you kind of get, hyped up. You say, I got all this money, and, you kind of feel better, more energized because, this is finally out of the way and you're kind of playing stress free. And it took a while for Vlad to, pop that first one. And I saw a clip on Twitter, Vlad dropping an F-bomb in the dugout saying it finally happened. You can only feel happy for the guy that finally he gets one to put on the board. And I think this may start, a hot streak for him because we all know the type of hitter Vlad is, and we know what he's capable of. He hit 48 home runs not too long ago, so he's definitely got the power potential in the bag. But coming back to Strider, it was just good to see him back on the mound. I personally, as a pitcher, he's just one of those guys that I always like watching. He's kind of developed over the last year or so. He was going to start throwing that curveball. We saw that in spring training before he got hurt last year. And, I think that if he, regains like his strength and gets his body right again, this is a guy that hands down is a top 5 pitcher in the MLB. And with guys like Sale on the team, we have Skeens, we have Skubal. These are all guys that are must-watch TV when they're on the mound. And I think that Strider coming back is only going to be great for the Braves moving forward. Because I think this, hopefully this can energize them as a team. I know today wasn't, the energizer that I think they were hoping for. But, I think, getting your best pitcher back on the mound although they did lose Reynaldo Lopez for an extended period of time, I think, Strider can definitely make up for what they lost in that rotation. And, hopefully the Braves are able to turn this around because it's running away from them pretty quick. But speaking of those Braves, the Atlanta Braves took on the Blue Jays today. And the two pitchers we had going was Chris Bassett versus Spencer Strider. And just off of the names, I think most people would have, put their money on Strider having the better start. But no, Chris Bassett had a phenomenal game, if I'm being quite honest. He went 5 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, and 10 strikeouts. 10. And, the Braves lineup, they aren't hitting right now. And, they're slumping really bad to start the season. But this is a good lineup. Like, there's no... Yeah, you have a couple guys at the bottom of the lineup. But this is a good lineup. Guys like Austin Riley, Ozzie Albies. You have Matt Olson. You have Sean Murphy. You have guys like Michael Harris at the top of the lineup, too. And Bassett was kind of dealing. He was very much so dealing. Lowers his ERA on the year to 0.77. 0.77. I don't think anybody in all of baseball would have put Chris Bassett leading the league in ERA right now, but quite a shocker. And overall, this game was very interesting from the Jays' perspective because they set a franchise record with strikeouts in a game with 19. 19 strikeouts as a team. That is quite insane. And against the Braves too. Like, again, this isn't the Chicago White Sox that they're playing. The Braves have a formidable lineup, and they were just absolutely getting the doors blown off of them every single time. Michael Harris struck out 4 times. Austin Riley struck out 4 times. And these are your two guys that, you kind of need to have producing at the top of the lineup if you're going to be successful for the Braves this year. And to get 8 strikeouts from those guys, it's not looking good. But again, the Jays doing the Jays thing, it's just one of these random days that you'll get a crazier performance from either a player or, in this case, a pitching staff. But yeah, it's crazy to see that it took this long for the Jays to break this record set by Roger Clemens all by himself in 1998, which is kind of crazy to think about, that all 18 strikeouts came from one player. And the Jays, they needed Bassett, followed up by Brendan Little, who then followed up by Nick Sandlin, then Yimi Garcia, and then Jeff Hoffman to close it out. But it just goes to show you how the game has changed so much in the last 20 years that we had one pitcher throw 18 strikeouts, and that set the franchise record for this long. And then now in today's game, we need 5 guys to break that record. But, that's a story for another day, how the game has changed. Maybe we might bring, a couple more people to talk about how the game has changed over these years. But, getting back to this franchise record set by the Jays, I think it's always cool to be a part of history, whether you were the guy that got 1 strikeout or the guy that got 10. Just being a part of, piece of history with a team, I think is always going to be, something you remember for the rest of your career, for sure. But to close out today's podcast, I want to touch on 2 things relating to, the upcoming World Baseball Classic. And recently in the week, we had Aaron Judge named captain of the USA team. And, it was a really cool moment with the press conference that Mark DeRosa, introduced Aaron Judge as a captain, and he had talked about DeRosa calling Mike Trout, basically telling him that, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have Judge be the MVP, or not the MVP, sorry, the captain. And, Trout was, very welcoming of the fact that this is the guy. Like, this is who needs to be the captain. So the passing of the torch, it's a really cool moment. These are two guys that have been, the face of baseball for as long as I can remember. Mike Trout, ever since coming into the league, he's been that guy. And now the game has changed. We have Judge and Ohtani at the top, but when it comes to players in the U.S., everybody thinks of Judge. And I think this is the perfect fit. Maybe a little biased as a Yankees fan, but I think this is going to be an absolutely electric World Baseball Classic. I am so excited to see it. And we have another captain that was announced, and that is Francisco Lindor, returning for the captain of the Puerto Rican squad. And I think this is another no-brainer. This is one of their Puerto Rico's guys. He was, a very integral piece of that team and their success last year. So I think if, he's going to regain that status once the WBC rolls around. But I think it's going to be a very, very competitive WBC the next time it comes around, which is 2026. And that's going to fly by. And I think it's going to be ultra competitive. We're going to see a possibly absolutely loaded USA roster. People are throwing out hypotheticals if this guy plays for here, but he also has eligibility for here. So it could be interesting how these rosters, how they kind of crack down on who can play where. And, if there's going to be guys playing out of position to accommodate for superstars. So I think it's one of the coolest things in baseball is getting to watch WBC, because that Japan versus USA game in the finals, not going to lie, that was probably one of the most electric games I've watched in recent memory. And that Trout versus Ohtani final at bat, absolute cinema. Absolutely cinema. I loved it. So the fact that we get to watch that sooner rather than later happen again, I think, all baseball fans are going to be excited to be watching this. There's always going to be that one country that overachieves and, a couple players show out and, get themselves an opportunity at maybe a major league contract. Who knows? There's always some great storyline in the WBC. It's a feel-good moment. So I'm very much looking forward to watching those games, and I will be definitely glued to my TV for all those games that will be going on. But with that wraps up today's podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what your country's WBC team could be looking like. I'm interested to see how the rosters, form in different positions, obviously, but let me know who your early favorites to win. I know Team USA is definitely going to be up there. You have Japan, obviously, the reigning champs. But who knows? Maybe the Dominican team makes some noise. Who knows? But with that being said, greatly appreciate you guys. It would be awesome if you guys could rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated. And it helps the podcast get out there to all types of baseball fans. Be sure to tune in to the next episode. We have an absolute banger for you guys. I think you guys are very much so going to enjoy the interview that I have lined up. It's going to be some good conversation for sure. So hope you guys enjoy that. And with that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.